welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll be treating rules of systematics. So first, systematic is a branch of biology that deals with the classification and the evolutionary relationship between organisms. So it's a branch of biology that actually tries to compare organisms based on their classification and also evolutionary relationship. It involves the identification, naming, and grouping of organisms into categories based on their shared characteristics and ancestry. So systematics also provide a framework for biological classification and contributes to our understanding of biodiversity. So in our previous lesson, we talked about how we classified living organisms using taxonomy, and we use stuff like binomial nomenclature. So this also is another branch of biology that is involved in the classification of living organisms based on their evolutionary relationship. So that's what systematics is. So let's see. Systematics follow precise rules and principles to ensure that biological classifications are consistent and globally recognized, the same as binomial nomenclature. So it's one of the fundamental rules in systematics is that classification must be accurately used to reflect the evolutionary relationships, grouping organisms based on their common ancestry and shared genetic traits, rather than just solely superficial or morphological similarities. So we don't, according to these systematics, it does not just try to group or classify organisms based on how they look or based on how much they look alike. They try to examine these organisms and see how their genetics or their genetic traits are alike, and find out how, if they had common ancestry. So they don't just look at the structure of their maybe their skeleton or stuff like that, which are their morphological data. So they don't just use that to examine or classify organisms. So this is a more rule-based method of classifying living organisms. So this approach integrates both morphological characteristics and also molecular data, enhancing the accuracy and classification, allowing scientists to be able to reconstruct phylogenetic trees and depict true evolutionary lineage. So in this method, as I said, it actually takes into account the genetic traits of these organisms. So you don't just look at the structure of the organisms, because that's when you talk about morphology, you talk about the appearance, maybe the structure of their skeleton or stuff like that. So that's when you talk about their morphology. So but this portion of biology known as systematics, they try to classify organisms based on not just their morphology but also their genetic traits, and also examination of their common ancestry. So this gives a more precise result when you try to give the phylogenetic tree of descent. So by adhering to these rules, systematics helps to provide a stable and natural framework for organizing biodiversity that supports communication among scientists. So all these methods of naming, their purpose is solely to be able to give scientists a common ground for identifying living organisms. So let's see. We have another fundamental rule in systematics, and this is known as consistency rule or hierarchy consistency. So this is a fundamental rule for systematics, and it is used to rank organisms based on a kind of hierarchical pattern of ranking. So from what I have here, I said another fundamental rule in systematics is consistency in the use of hierarchical rank to classify organisms. So let's see what hierarchical ranks mean. So hierarchical ranks, their examples of these ranks are kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So these naming or these particular rankings, they are known as hierarchical ranks. So in case you ask to list out the hierarchical ranks for naming organisms, so these are what they're asking you for, and they are structured hierarchies that organize biological organisms diversely. So the purpose for hierarchical classification, this is actually it is to facilitate clarity and communication among scientists. But not only that, it also helps to understand the evolutionary relationship between different organisms. So by assigning organisms specific rank based on their shared characteristics and ancestry, scientists can be able to create a universal system that reflects a natural biological grouping. So maintaining consistency ensures that classification system remains stable, predictable, and widely accepted, enabling effective comparison and study to vast variety of life forms on Earth. So this systematics, it makes use of the consistency rule and also hierarchical ranking. So let's see. Systematic employs both morphological and molecular data, which I stated earlier. It applies this to in its own form of categorizing of living organisms. So morphological data refers to physical structures and characteristics that I mentioned before, and molecular data, it means stuff like their DNA and protein analysis. So using these sources of data increases the accuracy and reliability of this kind of classification, that's systematic classification. The rule of priority and stability are also fundamental. So these are other rules that are used for systematic classification of living organisms. The rules are called the rules of priority and stability. So the rule of priority means that the first valid name given to a species must be used. So in this kind of in this kind of classification, you would have to make use of the first valid name that was given to a particular species. And while the rule of stability ensures that names do not change arbitrarily, that they don't just change the names of living organisms just by choice. So avoiding confusion among scientific communication. So in conclusion, the rules for systematics provide a standardized and scientific approach to classifying living organisms. So this principle ensures that taxonomy is consistent and reflects evolutionary history, and is also universally understood among scientific communities. So that will be the end of this lesson, and I'll be saying bye for now.